Hello and welcome to another member request video, a series where YouTube members and Patreon members can request a review of a short for me to take a look at, as long as it's not the Looney Tunes, since I'm covering all of them anyway. So the request this time round is Bee at the Beach, released in 1950. It's a Donald Duck short, so of course it's by Disney, and it's directed by Jack Hanna. Now I can tell you where you can find this beautiful remaster, but you're not going to like it because it's on the Walt Disney Treasures Donald Duck Volume 3 set. And yes, I am fully aware that some of those volumes are incredibly hard to get at reasonable prices. It's not impossible, but you just need really deep pockets at this point. And side note, Disney, come on, just re-release them. Yes, I want them on Blu-ray, but at this point, I think most people will even settle just reissues of those sets as is. Although it'd be nice if you could redo the Disney Rarities and Donald Volume 2 sets, but that's beside the point. In any case, if you haven't seen this one, well, I'm going to go through what the Donalds were like at this point in history in just a moment, but essentially you have a bee at the beach, hence the title, looking for a spot to sunbathe, as bees usually do, of course. Finds a spot, but Donald takes the spot, and he's trying to relax, but he inadvertently annoys the bee, and the bee gets annoyed at Donald, and you get the usual shtick afterwards, and you get some sharks as well, so there's that. And it's interesting that I'm recording this while it's winter here in Australia, so in June, July, August, but in America it's summer, and of course this is very appropriate for that time of year, although when this video is no longer a member exclusive, it will be probably winter anyway in the US. But a few bits of trivia for this one, and yeah, I actually found some, because you might have seen this short going, well, what on earth is he going to talk about with this one? Well, let's see how I go, shall we? So voice acting wise, you've got Clarence Nash. He's been the voice of Donald, and he does the voice of Donald all the way up to close to his death, with his last role being Mickey's Christmas Carol, and he even did the voice for kids at the Disneyland theme parks, where you would have this puppet he would go around with and do the voice. And the man was supremely talented. He wasn't just about doing Donald Duck's voice, he did a lot of animal noises. He was a very talented guy. But as for the bee, now that's done by Jimmy Macdonald. So Jimmy Macdonald was the sound effects guy, so he did the Foley effects you were hearing in a lot of the Disney shorts and movies of the time. By this point, he had even taken over the voice of Mickey Mouse because Walt Disney was just too busy to do it anymore. So he does the bee, and he does the shark effects here, and a lot of the sound effects you hear would be him as well. Though there is one sound effect towards the end where you hear like dog sounds. I mean, I didn't realize sharks sound like dogs, but whatever you go with it, that apparently comes from Bambi at one point, and I'm trying to pinpoint that as well. But if that's the case, then that's something interesting, isn't it? But let's put this short into perspective for those who aren't aware. By this point, Donald was the most popular character, with Goofy perhaps being a very close second. You also had Chip and Dale. They were incredibly popular as well around this time too, and I'll mention them in just a moment as well. In fact, Donald had so far eclipsed Mickey in terms of popularity that director Jack Hanna at one point, he actually mentioned this in an interview, that some of the shorts that were originally intended for Mickey were changed to Donald. And a lot of that just has to do with the fact that every time they try to do something to Mickey, they then realize, nah, this is actually more of a Donald story. So fast forward past World War II and all those shorts that he did during that, and I would love to cover those shorts one day. I actually like a lot of that stuff. So the focus ends up being that they're creating a lot of new adversaries. And the idea, of course, as the character is, it's to get him as riled up as much as possible. Easily the most popular of these, whether you like it or not, is the teaming up of Donald with Chip and Dale. In fact, they did it for 18 shorts. Even if you like them, don't watch them back to back because they get old very fast. I mean, I like some of them, but yeah, a lot of it's just very repetitive. So if you try and watch those Disney Treasure sets, so Volume 3 and Volume 4, yeah, you'll be watching a lot of those in a row, I can tell you that right now, so definitely space those out. But you've got this bee character. Someone said his name is Spike the Bee. He's not named here, and I don't think he's even named in any of the classic shorts from memory, but we'll just call him Spike. I think that's easier. He appeared in a few shorts with Donald, although some appearances in certain shorts, there's this other design of a bee. I don't think any of it was actually intended to be one and the same character. It's just, oh, we need a bee, let's just make a bee and put him in the short, and that's it. But there are definitely some shorts where they use this design, or a very similar one, and it's quite obvious that it's the same character in that. So here, yeah, you get your typical plot, which is most of Donald's around this particular time period. So Donald is enjoying himself, he's being all carefree, something eventually bothers him, and the rest of the short is him getting angrier and angrier. So essentially it's a formula by this point. Sometimes you will get the odd break here and there with the formula, like Donald's dream voice, where he gets this wonderful voice, or Donald's double trouble, where it's just this other doppelganger who has this really nice voice, and he ends up swooning Daisy, and I really like that one, by the way. But all in all, with Walt at this point being more focused on movies and TV and the soon-to-be Disneyland, it definitely feels like most of the Donalds of this time period are just by the numbers. Now, that's not to say that they're all bad. They definitely lack some of the spark and energy of the earlier entries of the late 1930s and even to the early 1940s. Once they realized they had a formula, they really went with it. So you get these sort of shorts for a little while, and then while all the other animated units get shut down, you pretty much have two left. So you got your Donalds that went into CinemaScope, and that gave it a bit of a breath of fresh air. Some of those ones are really interesting. And you got other one-shots that you would see, like Toot Whistle Plunk Boom and that sort of thing. But all in all, we're talking about this short, Be at the Beach. This is one that I grew up with and watched constantly as a kid, so I was happy to do it. Because I'll let you guys in a little secret. The person that recommended it for me to review this is my wife. So she loves this one too. This is a constant one that she loves to watch. And you know what? It's fine. It's actually a really nice short. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at it from start to finish. Again, there's nothing really too in-depth about this one. Unlike the Warner Brothers shorts I'm currently doing, there's no in-depth pop culture references or anything like that. This is just your standard short, which for some inexplicable reason is not on Disney Plus or even remastered in high definition as far as I'm aware. The copy I'm using is from the Disney Treasures, which I've upscaled to get an approximate look of how it looks in HD. Is this going to match a proper HD scan? Of course not, but I think it looks pretty good. So let's take a look at this. And right away when we open up, got a nice background here, and you can say what you want about this short. You might be indifferent to these Donalds, and fair enough, but you can't deny a lot of the Disney shorts with their higher budgets, a lot of that you will see on the screen, and this is definitely one of those times. There are a few shortcuts here and there. I mean, it's not like Disney had a bottomless pit of money. If anything, this is the year when Cinderella comes out, and they needed a major hit, and Cinderella fortunately did that, and that led to other things. But all in all, though, the budgets were definitely higher than what was over at Warner Brothers and other studios. I think MGM might be the closest in terms of budgets. So we see our Spike character being all carefree, sees a spot, and what do you know? We see Donald, and he's at the beach by himself. I guess maybe Daisy is too busy. Maybe he's not interested in taking the nephews out, whatever. He's at the beach. He's going to have a good time. Funny thing about this, though, Donald usually wears no pants, and yet here, he's wearing shorts. Kind of weird. It's kind of like when he steps out of the shower, he would have a towel, and he usually doesn't wear pants at all, but whatever. I mean, even the bee character's wearing shorts too, so I guess, you gotta be modest at the beach, for reasons. So the bee settles in, and we get the usual case of Donald not intending to hurt anyone. He just wants to enjoy his day at the beach, but he inadvertently annoys the bee, so he covers him with the blanket, beats his chest like Tarzan, I guess, excited to go for a nice swim. And if you look very closely, in fact, if you freeze frame that one moment just before Donald actually steps on the bee, there's some pretty funny expressions here. So while Disney shorts are not exactly known for wild animation, at least at this point in time, there's still some stuff here and there that's interesting to see if you slow-mo. And one of the best aspects of Disney shorts and Disney feature films for that matter is the animation acting. And in this case, we got a wonderful little showcase of the bee explaining his frustrations to Donald, and he decides to kick sand in his face. Now, I don't know if that's a reference to the whole Charles Atlas thing with the bully at the beach kicking sand at the weakling's face, and the weakling ends up getting stronger and gets back at the bully later on. I was thinking that maybe it's referencing that, maybe it's not, I don't know. But of course, Donald's annoying, but the poor bee ends up getting trapped in the clam. Now, one thing that a lot of the younger folks don't realize is that a lot of those soda pop bottles, they didn't have twist tops, so they had to use a bottle opener, and sure enough, Donald uses the bee's stinger as a bottle opener. The bee ends up sabotaging Donald's straw, and Donald decides to trap him in the bottle, so not really much to it there. So Donald ends up trapping him inside a bottle while Donald pulls out his super duper raft, and I've always, as a kid, wanted to know if those things were real, and well, they wouldn't exist in this way. But hey, Donald's got one, and whenever I would go to the beach, I've always wanted one of those rafts, complete with a nice little umbrella on top. Donald's relaxing on the water. Spike figures out that, hey, if he shakes the bottle enough, he can be launched out into the sky. And we've got some beautiful special effects here. I mean, shout out to the special effects animators on this one, particularly in this scene, because They really are the unsung heroes of these earlier shorts, because these days you can generate a lot of effects on the computer, but back then it was all hand done, frame by frame, just like the character animation. So the bee's mad, he attacks Donald, Donald avoids him. But we get to some of my favourite bits of this short, so the bee ends up releasing some air from the raft, Donald shoots over, and realizes that he's surrounded by sharks, which, if you look very closely at those fins, they're a little bit too close together. I mean, there must be some pretty small sharks there, but whatever. I just thought it was quite amusing, because all they would have animated are those fins. So Donald ends up inflating the raft, even though his first instinct should be to actually get the heck out of the water, because you don't want to be in shark-infested waters, but we get a bit here where I always loved as a kid, Spike ends up making holes in the raft itself. But one interesting little detail I didn't really pay too much attention to before is that he'll do for the hands the 4 holes, 4 fingers, 4 holes, 4 fingers. But when he makes it for the feet, he puts 4 holes, but ends up only making 3 toes, I guess, on his feet. I mean, it's just observation. It's just something I noticed. It's like, oh, okay, well, they made it work. But in any case, we now get to the third act where pretty much the bee's just going to win the entire way through now. And this is all going to be about just tormenting Donald, and he's not going to get a win for the rest of the shorts. And that's more or less the formula. By the third act, Donald almost never wins. And again, there's nothing wrong with that formula. It's just, if you watch a lot of these shorts in a row, you're going to get a lot of repetition like that. But Spike cuts a hole in the raft, Donald's bottom goes through, and we see this shark, which I have to say, I love the design and animation of this shark. I like the fact that the animator more or less morphed the shark with the attitude of a dog. Just the way the shark would stick its tongue out, like it's panting like a dog, basically. But sure enough, the shark sees the meal, but Donald ends up avoiding it. And in a beautiful bit of animation here, you have Donald trying to escape the water, which is what he should have done earlier. But since no one else is in the water, maybe there was shark warnings and no one was in the water. But, in any case, the shark ends up stretching out the raft, putting it onto a buoy. And we get the funniest part of this short, in my opinion, where Donald's holding onto the shark's teeth, and we're just hearing that whistle from the shark, which is something I actually tried to do as a kid like that. Open your mouth, have the tongue out, and try and whistle, which is, of course, impossible. But, hey, I was a kid, right? Cut me some slack. Spike loosens the raft. Donald ends up inside the shark. And then pretty much the rest of the short is just this whole shark family, or their friends, or I don't know what they are. And we end with that final gag where Donald's up in the air using cartoon physics to keep himself afloat. I mean, those are some lungs he's got to keep him up in the air with the umbrella like that. But it's all about the fact that Donald Duck somehow creates wings out of the umbrella and ends up flying away, even though he's a duck and should be able to fly regardless. But that's okay, he's a humanoid duck, so we'll forgive him. And we end right there with Spike the Bee laughing. So it's riveting stuff, isn't it? But look, you just take it for what it is. It's fine. It's competently made. It has a strong story. It's not the most hilarious thing in the world. And I've got to be fair to it, even though I've seen all of them and a lot of them do blend together from this period of time in Donald's filmography. But what can I say? It's a childhood favourite. And I still watch it. I still find it funny. Look, it's 8 out of 10 for me, and a lot of that's due to the craftsmanship here. They really knew how to make their shorts. It's just that the shorts at this point definitely lost a bit of their spark, and no doubt that would just be due to Walt Disney turning his attention elsewhere as we open the 1950s with him being on television and creating Disneyland and so on. But that'll do it for this one. If you have a request for a review, as I said, not for Looney Tunes, because I'm doing all of them anyway, but for any other studio, and maybe even a television episode of a Hanna-Barbera show or something, definitely let me know what you want to see. So you just got to become a member and just let me know and I might pick your idea. But that'll do it for this one. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and until next time, take care.